Hello there, Michelle Shorts here for My Favourite Things. Today I have a clean and simple card to share with you using the new Chip Chip Hooray set. So let's get started. This is the adorable Chip Chip Hooray set. Cuteness overload right there. It's absolutely adorable. I have stamped one of the kittens plus the chef's hat and the heart onto some smooth white cardstock using black ink. And now I'm colouring in the images using Copic markers. Copic markers are my definitely preferred preference when it comes to colouring mediums. I just find them quite easy and quick to use. I'm starting off with my darkest shade for the kitten here, and this is C7, and I'm going around the outside edges. So I wanted the images to be a little bit darker towards the outside edges and then get a little bit lighter towards the centre, especially for this kitten. So I'm adding a little bit of darkness at the bottom of her paws and then also on her bottom itself. And then I thought I'd finished and I forgot her little ears there. So now I'm going in with C5 and I'm blending that out. So I'm blending the C5 and the C7 together and then pulling that colour a little bit more towards the image. So going in here towards the bottom there, and then I can blend that out with the C3. And just trying to get a fairly smooth blend. I do want there to be, like I said, quite a bit of darkness towards the outside edges. So I'm not going to really worry too much if they're not blended perfectly. I can then go in with C2, and quite often I would jump from the C3 to the C1. But in this instance, I thought that I would add in that C2. And then I can go in with C1 as my lightest shade. So just trying to blend that out as best as possible, especially in the centre of her face. I'm then going in with C0 for the utensil in the kind of bowl there that she's holding. And then for her ears, the little pads on the feet and her nose, I'm using RV52. Then for the contents of the bowl, I'm using some E shades, some brown shades. So starting off with E55, then E53, and then blending that out with the E50. And then for the bowl, I'm using some purple shades. So I'm starting off with the darkest shade, which is V15, going around the bottom of that bowl and the sides. And then I'm also going to add a little bit onto the chef's hat and also the heart. I don't want the chef's hat to actually be purple, but I do want some colour on it. So then I can blend that out with the V12. And then go in with the V01 to colour in the rest of that bowl. And then I am going to finish off the heart with that colour and then add a little bit onto the chef's hat as well. And then I thought that I got the darkest colour a little bit lost there, so I am going back in with that for the bowl. And then using V000 for the hat. And then finishing off the hat with the Colourless Blender 0, just to kind of fade it out to white. So it doesn't look purple, but it definitely has kind of like a shadow to it with those purple shades. I could have done that with grey, but because the kitten is grey, I didn't want to have the hat grey as well. I'm then taking the coordinating Chip Chip Hooray dynamics, placing those over the images, holding them down with some low tack tape, and then running those through my die cutting machine. And I did cover those two little images completely with the tape, so I just need to remove that before I can pop those out. While I'm doing my die cutting, I'm taking the Tool Hello Dynamics and I'm cutting that from Grapesicle cardstock. And I'm going to cut that out twice so that I can stack the letters one on top of each other. Ordinarily, I probably would do this with 3 layers higher. I quite like the thickness of that, but because I'm going to add the images on top of this, I don't want it to be too bulky. So I'm just going in with the 2 layers today. So I'm taking some liquid glue, going around that letter there, and then I can pop the other one on top. And I didn't realise that this H isn't completely symmetrical on either side, so it didn't quite line up. So I can just turn that the right way round and then pop that down. And that's the great thing with using the liquid glue. I've got that time to sort of wiggle them together. And then I can just do the same thing with the other letters, finishing off with the O here. And it's just going to help pop the letters away from the kind of base that I'm adding them onto by having them sort of the 2 layers thick. So just lining those up. And then whilst I was doing the die cutting, I also die cut some of the images again, well, all 3 of the images actually, with some white cardstock so that I can layer those up as well. Because I'm adding them on top of the letters, I wanted them to be a little bit thicker just to give a little bit of stability to them. So I can just pop a little bit of the liquid glue onto the heart there and try and line those up. It's absolutely tiny, so I'm trying to do my best there not to drop it. And then I wanted to cut off the kind of white border at the bottom of the hat. I didn't want there to be a white border between the bottom of the hat and the top of the kitten's head. That is just a personal preference. I think it would look nice either way, but I decided that I'd rather just kind of have it sort of look a little bit like one whole image. So I've cut the bottom off there. I'm just making sure that that's going to fit nicely. And then I can add some more liquid glue onto the other piece, pop that on top, and then I'm going to use the top piece as a guide to cut the bottom piece off. And then I've got that adorable little chef's hat there. For the sentiment, I'm taking the sentiment that reads, "You make the world a better place," from the Chip Chip Hooray set. I'm going to stamp that down onto some black licorice cardstock. So I'm just going to prep the cardstock with an anti-static powder tool, remove the excess powder with a brush. And then I can ink up the sentiment using Versamark ink, which is a clear sticky ink. I can close the door of the Mini Misty and press that down. I can then apply some detail white embossing powder, and I do like to do this a few times just to make sure that I get really nice coverage of that powder. Tap off the excess, and then I can heat set that until it's completely melted, trying not to overheat that powder. I'm then going to remove any anti-static powder with a cloth, and then I can cut that down into a strip. I've then got a panel of white cardstock here that's cut to 3 3/4 inches by 5 inches, and the easiest way to line up the letters would be to take the negative of the die cutting and then place that on top and add the letters inside. But I wanted the letters to kind of be elongated a little bit so that there was a little bit more gap in between. So I'm literally just going to eyeball it here. Sometimes that works, sometimes that doesn't. So I'm taking some more liquid glue, adding that onto the back of the H here. I'm going to start off with the 2 outer letters, the H and the O. So adding some of that liquid glue onto the back of the H, and then I can pop that down onto the panel. And what I'm going to do is try and make it so that I've got kind of like an equal gap at the top, the side and the bottom. So just using my tweezers there to kind of hover it in place, and then I can press that down. And I'll be honest with you, I had to cut that out because I did get my head completely in the way. I found it a lot easier to really lean over and make sure that I was lining it up straight. So I can do the same thing for the O on the other side of this panel. And then I can bring in the L for the centre. And then now I've just got those 2 gaps that I can add in the E and then also the L. And I think it's pretty much lined up quite nicely. I'm then taking the orange sherbet 6x6 paper pad, and this paper pad is full of lots of lovely patterned paper, and I'm taking one that is kind of like a pink and a purple plaid. So what I want to do first is add some tape runner adhesive onto my card base. This is an A2 size card base, so a finished size of 4¼ inches by 5½ inches. I've added the tape runner onto the front of the card base, and then I can add the patterned paper on top. And I'm trying to line it up with the fold there at the top. If I've got excess on the either side, it doesn't really matter because I can cut that off, but it's very difficult to cut anything off when it's kind of like on a fold. So I'm just being careful here to line that up as best as possible. Really press that down, and then I can cut off the excess from the sides. I've added some thin foam tape onto the back of the Hello panel, and then I can add that on top of the card. And I just thought it'd be quite nice having that little bit of the patterned paper just around the edges of that panel. And this patterned paper was the kind of inspiration for my colour palette today. So just popping that down, and then I've got my sentiment strip here, and I'm just figuring out where I want it to be placed. And I want to just add some thin foam tape in between where those letters are. This is so that it kind of lays flat. If I'd put foam tape along the whole edge, it's going to kind of lift up and down sort of thing, if that makes sense. So I'm just adding the foam tape in between the letters, and then I can pop that down on top. And I'm using a T-square ruler to try and help me place that down straight, but it was interfering with the tweezers there, so I've just removed those and I'm just trying to place that down straight. I've then added some foam tape on either side of the kitten, and then I can place that down. I wouldn't really need to do that if I'd just done the letters one thickness high, but because I've got them two thicknesses high, I didn't really want there to be sort of an uneven look with any of these images on top. And then I'm just figuring out where I need to add the foam tape on the hat, and that's just going to be on the right hand side, and then I can add liquid glue onto the left hand side and just pop that down. And then for the heart, I'm just using some liquid glue, popping that down on top. And then I'm adding some black glaze pen onto her eyes. That's just going to help them pop a little bit. Add a little bit of sparkle as well. And then I'm taking a white gel pen and just adding two highlights on the images. One on the top of the kitten's head, and then also one on the bowl. And that is the card finished for today. Really clean and simple, but I like how that hello just kind of grounds the images a little bit. And then also the kitten obviously sitting on the sentiment strip as well. Links to the products that I used will be listed in the description bar here on YouTube. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.